Welcome back to Seek a Strength. Welcome back to Seek a Stan. Today, once again, we're talking about something that caught our attention on the internet. Obviously, with the build-up to the Rugby World Cup, with the warm-up matches that are going on right now, Irish rugby is in the spotlight. And Garth came across a random video that's from quite some time ago. It was when Bundee was playing with the Lions. And it's Bundee doing... Oh, is it only 3 weeks ago?
Oh, the video was put up.
Yes, yeah. So obviously from the previous Lions tour. And Bundee's doing some box squats here. Box squats, for anyone who's watched any of the Irish rugby, but to be honest, most professional rugby players training, box squats make up a massive proportion of their kind of general strength and power training. And particularly in this case, it's the comment section caused us to want to talk about it a bit.
Yeah, I suppose the comment section is a Instagram comment section at the moment is a really good representation of what the current understanding of training is, because it used to be like news articles and stuff. Maybe you'd see the comments on websites, but a lot of those websites don't have that, and we don't read the newspapers. I think Instagram is a really good reflection of what people think is going on top of YouTube comments in the current training sphere. And my favorite is the kind of death of the experts. You know, it's like the current era we live in is people who have no fucking notion does not stop them talking about things they don't have a notion about. Or people have like a peripheral idea.
Yeah.
And then they'll just lash into some comments.
Yeah.
Top comment. What upsets me the most is how many upvotes some of them get.
Oh my God.
People are like, yeah,
he is right. Just to give you some background to the video, it's Bundee doing like one set of squats. I think he gets up to
240.
Gets up to 240 for some reps. He says his max is 255 or something. Bundee, for people who don't know who he is a big, strong, jacked Irish rugby player.
Yeah, he's frighteningly athletic.
He is. He would scare you. Unbelievable player. He plays in the centre, so he's one of the backs. But he's doing very heavy box squats, and they're flying up.
Flying up.
If you saw anybody seeing these in the gym, you'd be like, that's a great box squat. They're not even that high for box squats. I've certainly seen throwers doing far higher, kind of closer to 45-degree range of motion versus 90-degree range of motion at the knee. But as we've already alluded to, this comment section is a slurry pit of idiocracy.
Yeah, we'll actually get to the box squat and the science behind it, or the potential science behind it. But first one up is from Jordan Connolly 95 saying, if only he went all the way down to parallel, shame there are no reps. He's a fucking rugby player. What no rep? There's the concept of no rep doesn't even matter. It doesn't even apply here.
My favourite, the fact that he's counting reps, he's not a CrossFitter. My favourite genre of comment in this whole thing, and I'm not calling out a particular one because there's probably 10 of these comments, is, yeah bro, you should just drop the weight down. You get so much more power development and strength development if you're doing lighter weight to full range of motion. What are you talking about? Like, in what world do you possibly think that's true? We're going to talk a small bit later, but there's another comment as well from a physiotherapist and a rugby man who knows what he's talking about.
There's actually there's one from Paula Matthew, who's saying, or Mathuan, Paula Mathuan is saying, people saying he knows what he's doing haven't watched Ireland rugby players working out. Some of their strength and conditioning coaches have taught them poorly. The weight here isn't near as impressive, doing half reps, no depth, may as well be doing a leg press machine. There's this concept again of like arbitrary things that don't apply to a professional rugby player. The best rugby team in the world, doing what it needs to be doing.
Also, like, the number one ranked team in the world with significantly less financial investment, virtually no non-native players or players that don't play in Ireland playing for the team, full stop. It's just a policy of the Irish Rugby Football Union that you're playing in Ireland if you're going to play for Ireland's national team. Very, very few countries are like that. Very few countries develop the caliber of player. So to be honest, if you're having a go off IRFU strength and conditioning coaches, you're just belligerent, or else you just have no idea, which is fair as well. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't cost anything to set up an Instagram account and comment from a private account.
Oh, we've got a good one here. Careful now, all the pre-diabetic powerlifters will soon arrive telling him everything he's doing is wrong. So, it's an interesting one. I think we've talked about this before on the aspect of half squats, and we've talked about this in another kind of smaller video, so I don't think we've ever made main video about it. A lot of times we would have touched on this during the squats we would have seen usually throwers doing. So we might see throwers doing squats to boxes. Throwers are, I think, we're always a great example. If you're looking to maximize power, look at what a lot of throwers are doing. It's about discus, hammer, whatever it is, even javelin throwers. Look at their S&C work, because they are the ones who really and truly inherently understand the value of good S&C work to complement, really important word, complement that athlete's sport, as they're looking for some of the purest expression of power. And we look at some of those best throwers like Ryan Krauser, Daniel Stahl, two great throwers, and any number of other ones. And a lot of times you'll see them do full squats, but you'll also see them doing half squats or box squats. And there's some very good reasons for that.
Yeah, so when you're looking at power development, you're really looking at two things. So it's the absolute weight, the absolute force you have to put down through the floor, how many newtons are going through the sole of your foot into the floor, and then you look at how quickly that happens. So power is the rate at which work is done. And when you start looking at things like a full depth squat, or you might call it ass to grass squat, or people not wanting a heel raise because they feel like their ankle will go through more range of motion, all of those things are going to slowly reduce both the amount of absolute weight you're going to lift, and they'll increase the amount of time it takes to lift it. So your actual muscle contractions are taking a bit slower to happen. It's not as powerful, or there's not as much kind of raw strength there being used because the weight isn't as heavy. And when you're looking at something like rugby or ice hockey or American football or hammer throwing or discus throwing, raw power is the real thing you're looking to develop all the time. And so it's difficult because many people come to the world of strength and conditioning or come to the world of lifting weights kind of in adulthood, and they mightn't have grown up, or they mightn't have a massive amount of experience behind them, and they'll say, oh, when I go to the gym, I understand doing full depth squats at a reasonable weight is the safest thing and the best thing for me to do. Or they might come from a bodybuilding world where they say doing full depth squats, the more range of motion, the better it is, the more of that muscle is utilized, and then the more hypertrophy will occur afterwards. Unfortunately, neither of those things hold true when you're looking at actual power development for real athletes.
Yeah, so I think when people might assume, when they see us coming from a weightlifting background or CrossFit or something similar like that, you might assume that we are 100% full depth squats, ass to grass crusade, and that's all we'd ever use with athletes. But it is a very nuanced position to take. In the video itself, Bundee actually says that I don't think they're real squats, they're half squats. So that alone should let people, before they start commenting, be like, wait a minute, maybe there's something else going on here. So there's a good case, I think, to use both of those. And primarily the main leg strength driver should be the full depth squat, and whatever the full depth squat is, given that an athlete, especially of someone like Bundee's level, likely has a lot of issues in terms of injuries, and whatever full range of motion is that you can do consistently, that you can do safely, and repeat it across a training block, and then incrementally increase the load on that same level of range of motion. Full range of motion squats are, I think, hugely beneficial for athletes, especially in rugby, where you're looking at essentially going through a couple of car crashes per games, and especially if you're in a high level rugby game, if you're in international rugby with teams like Ireland, England playing each other, a lot of behemoths running at each other, the ability to withstand loads and change direction through a full range of motion, being at the most extreme range of motion in your lower body, the bottom of a squat, for example, and building tolerance there is hugely beneficial. And on top of that, it seems like a lot of full range of motion stuff is very beneficial for the use of hypertrophy work. And so that full range of motion squat in and of itself is incredibly useful. But when you look at the box squat, you shouldn't be looking at it as a main strength builder. You shouldn't be looking at it as something that's specifically for just strength. You should look at it as more almost as a kind of a plyometric exercise in some sense. So it's not really a plyometric exercise in the sense that it's a jump, but it is similar. It should be kind of more in that kind of power compartment in your mind for your power production. The problem with that is that, like Darren kind of alluded to, most people don't really need that yet, or they're not really at a stage where they'd benefit from that. For example, if you're someone who can currently squat 100 kilos to a reasonable depth, to a depth that would pass even Instagram's criteria. So a full depth squat and you're a rugby player, maybe 120, there isn't really a whole lot of use for you. It's not really a sensible use of your training to go and do 220 kilo box squats to, a third or a fifth of the depth that you could be doing on a full squat.
Yeah, I think most of the kind of outcry against this is from that group or that cohort who are trying to build their squat, and then they say, somebody asks them what their max are, they say, oh, it's 100 kilos or 140 kilos or 180 kilos. And then they see somebody like this who's also incredibly fast, incredibly fit, incredibly agile, and very skillful, and they say, oh, that doesn't count. You just have to have like a certain level of nuance that at certain times of people's careers or at certain times of people's block periodized year, they're going to have to use very, very different tools. And another interesting thing, if you'd watch the video, Bundee will talk about, when you start picking up a few niggles, you're not going to be sitting down all the way into the squat. And absolutely, if you're training with the Lions, you're going to be just in camp for a very short number of weeks. You're going to go down to the Southern Hemisphere and play a few tests, and then you're going to go back to your original country. It's a kind of a touring team. When you see people training in those environments, they're not doing their kind of long-term development work there. All they're doing is putting the very sharpest of edges on their kind of physique or on their current abilities and then moving on. So it's not, anytime you see people training in these environments, you're not going to get a good idea for what they do most of the time. You're just going to see what they do in 2 or 3 weeks before they play their first game.
So what really should be thought of when you're doing these kind of half squats is you get a benefit of using essentially more weight. Now, a lot of people might mistake that for, it's an ego lift and you're using more weight, then you're not really getting a lot of the benefits from that. But one of the things we often talk about, if you look at a lot of our thrower reaction videos, is that we talk about heavy weights fast. And if you look at someone, I think Daniel Stahl is one of my favorite. Stahl was one of my favorite examples of this because he is applying that principle to ludicrous weights. He's getting that principle into huge deadlifts, squatting 300 kilos as fast as possible. Now, the thing is, most people aren't Daniel Stahl. Even Bundee isn't someone like Daniel Stahl, where you can move enormous weights through a really full range of motion as fast as possible. So in those scenarios, what you do get the benefit of is you get the really heavy weight relative to kind of your body weight and your normal full depth squat, for example, and then you can move it through a certain range of motion. Now, there is a minimum threshold for that range of motion. Getting it out and doing a jerk dip, for example, probably is going to meet the threshold of usefulness in terms of you're barely getting below the whip of the barbell. But once we start getting closer to, parallel or a kind of general bench height, you're getting enough of a response from that range of motion while still coupling the fact that you're using a super heavy weight and you can move it really fast. And if you look at these box squats, they're moving really quickly. Now, one of the reasons we don't really like using box squats for this, preferably you would use something like a half squat, you would just stop at depth, or you would maybe use pins, but even that's less preferable, is that when you're hitting that bench or box or whatever it is, a lot of times you're smashing off the bench, and a lot of times you'll see a lot of hip shift, a lot of wiggle in the bottom. And when you're using box squats, they're going to be heavier weight because that's what you're looking for, and you want to move it fast, so that's why you're hitting the box fast. You get a lot of instability in the hips and the lower back, and no matter what any angry physios on the internet might say, that's just not something you want to be taking through an elite level athlete through, especially in their S&C work. So when you're getting those heavy weights, it's preferable probably to do just half squats, but move them as fast as you possibly can. And you still get that kind of heavy weights fast, which hopefully will transfer over to some power training. But on top of that, then you can still do your full depth squats to produce full range of motion, develop a different kind of force production, and develop full range of motion tolerance, and give you extra mass, hopefully in the right areas that you're looking for, that hopefully the squat would build for you.
Yeah, I think if you are bringing these into your own training, you want to see like a nice way of setting that up where you're not going to be hitting something hard like a bench or like a plyo box. There's two really nice options here. The first one is to stretch a normal elastic band between two implements behind you. So maybe you have a box on each side and you've stretched an elastic band across it. So as you come down, you actually feel your ass basically hitting the the band, and then you know in your head to turn around and come straight back up. Small bit of kinesthetic feedback. If you're slightly more of a beginner and the actual stability of the box at the bottom is something you need or something you want, possibly you're transitioning over from using a bench or a hard plyo box, definitely those soft plyo boxes, the kind of massive blocks of foam, work really well in that case. You have that kind of mental support that you have behind, although you probably shouldn't think about it like that. And the other advantage of using those soft foam plyo boxes is if you drop a barbell on it, the barbell's not going to bend over like a handlebar.
Yeah. So I think one of the main things, if you are going to try implement half squats into your training, and this is mostly for kind of rugby players, throwers who are looking to implement them, realistically, most of our athletes don't even get them because there's a certain threshold that you need to meet to be able to lift heavy enough weights to justify going to those weights and moving them fast enough. So if you think about it there, you're looking at 240 and you're like, oh, anyone could move 240 like that. But realistically, most people couldn't. So you need to be in a place where you're at a threshold above your body weight. You know, you're kind of looking at 2.2, 2.5 times your body weight, plus or minus a little bit, where you can move it quickly enough for a reasonable number of reps and sets to get a training effect. So again, if you're someone who has very poor motor control on a full depth squat, you struggle to get below parallel on your regular squats, and your form is quite poor, you have a good morning style squat, you have a lot of issues, you know, you're not really in a position where you can justify going, okay, I can move 220. Realistically, what's going to happen if you can squat 120 or 140 with multiple sets and reps, there is 0 point in you loading up 220 and trying to do some box squats or half squats with it, because you just won't be able to move it fast enough to justify some of the effect. You want to be in a position, I think it was Andrew Porter was squatting, was it 230 for eights? Was it two? It was really
something crazy.
Something in the 200 for sets of eights around start of July. You might remember from the new show we did in July. They were very, very good squats, very deep quality squats. And so if someone like Andrew said, okay, later in the week or maybe a couple of days later, I'm going to load up 250 and do 4 or 5 sets of 3 half squats as fast as possible, then he's justified, because he can put that maximum speed into those heavy weights and he's going to get some of that benefit for his power training. Whereas if you're someone who can barely squat 120 or 130, it's just not worth your while. It's a waste of time. And there could be an argument that you make yourself a little bit slower, and there might be some research that suggests that. Will it make a meaningful effect? I would say only temporarily. If you're someone who is, let's say you tempt that 240 and you're squatting 140 kilos below that and you can't move it fast enough, I would suspect that you'd be pretty slow for the next following days, because you're hugely taxing your CNS and weights that you've never accrued that training block in between and gotten used to those weights. And you're just probably going to make yourself slower. Whether that's, if you do it long enough, probably you'll have some positive or permanent negative impact on your speed.
Yeah, absolutely. These should certainly be a kind of squat that when you're doing them, you're never doing them so heavy that they're moving slow, and then because of that, you're never doing them so heavy where a miss is even a possibility. Mm-hmm. So it is heavy weights moving fast, as so very often we say on this channel. Thanks very much to everyone who watched. If you have an interest in off-season strength and conditioning, off-season strength and hypertrophy, please check out the Seeker Strength off-season strength and hypertrophy training blocks. There's 2 of them. Each one of them is 4 weeks long, 4 sessions per week. It gives you a great step up when you're in the off-season and heading into your pre-season block. If you are playing rugby in the Northern Hemisphere and you're going back in season soon, so probably in the next couple of weeks you're transitioning out of your pre-season into your normal season training, we have the Seeker Strength in-season rugby program. This gives you 2 sessions per week, so basically takes care of all the gym training you'll need to do as you're playing during the normal season.
And yes, before anyone asks, of course the Irish team are very juicy. One of the juiciest, I'd say.